We've got some big board game awards and finally the rules to Lorcana. All this and more in this week's board gaming news of April 19th, 2023. We have two different award stories to go over. The first one we're going to talk about is the one that actually announced their winners. This is for the American Tabletop Awards. This was started back in 2019 for 2018 awards, but we now have the winners for 2023. So first, there are 4 categories. We have the early gamers. This is definitely going to be for your kids and lighter. And this is a game called Boop. The next category is casual gaming. And the game that won this one this year is Turing Machine. I actually played this one and I think it's a lot of fun, really cool, and really almost part of it's just amazed at how they are able to design the game to work. But definitely if you love puzzle games and haven't picked it up already, you should definitely work on getting this one. Next, though, we've got the strategy section, and for strategy games, the winner was Planet Unknown. This is another planet terraforming game that uses polyominoes to cover up your planet instead of hexes. Looks really cool, and definitely one that I probably should try to get my hands on and play. And finally, we have the complex category, and that one is going to Carnegie. What's really impressive about this one is it beat a lot of ones that I would have assumed. We've got Frosthaven, we've got Ark Nova, we have My Father's Work, which was a personal favorite of mine from last year. So this is obviously one that, well, I should play it because I actually own it. I've picked it up and just never had the chance to actually have it hit the table. So really will, get on it. But these were the winners. You can go through and see what they went up against, what's recommended, and what lost to them. Let me know your thoughts if you think that these games were worthy of their title, or was there another contender in the list that you think would have been your pick? The next category to talk about are the Dice Tower Awards. This one doesn't have winners yet, but they have shown off the nominees for each category. So we'll quickly go over them, and of course, let me know which one you think should win for that category. Now I'm going to put them up on screen. The first one is going to be the best welcoming game. And we see a bunch of games I've already played, including the one I didn't, but won the previous early gamer award, Boop. So obviously that is one I really need to go try out. Now, Best Expansions is up next, and it's sort of funny for me to see Dune Imperium on here twice, technically, for there's both Immortality as well as Rise of Zinks. Now, Party Game. This is where Ready, Set, Bet returns, and I'm definitely leaning a bit more towards. Granted, I have not played the other 3. Phantom Inc., though, was one of my favorites as well, so that is a tough call. Best Solo Game. Now, there are a ton on here that I played a little bit, or they have a solo mode. I will definitely lean a bit more towards the Batman The Dark Knight Returns, not just because it's the one I played and put on my list, but also, to my knowledge, the rest of these aren't solo in mind. The Batman The Dark Knight Returns literally is just a solo game. So to me, it should carry some weight, but moving on. Best 2-player games. Return of the Dark Tower returns again, as well as Boop. So those are definitely ones that are going to be vying for position. So the Dark Tower actually lost for the category it was in the American Tabletop Awards. So we'll see if it's able to gain some here at the Dice Tower. Then we've got reprints. It's definitely a bit of an interesting one here because, for example, Libertalia and Return to Dark Tower, they're very different. They actually have different rules and stuff. It's not just nicer pieces based on their previous print. I know Cat in the Box was printed in Japan, but I don't know if the rules are actually different versus its first version. In terms of the other two, I'm pretty sure Castles is just nicer components. I don't think it changes the rules that much if I recall, and I don't know much about Get On Board. But like the expansion one, I do think it really depends on how you judge what your qualities you're looking for in a reprint. Best Co-op, once again, Return of the Dark Tower. Nemesis is a beloved game series. Cora Quest makes an appearance here, a bit more on the younger side, so I'm curious how it will fare against these much more heavier games. Now, best game from small publisher. We've got a bunch of returning ones, but we also have the Planet Unknown, which won best strategy game earlier, which makes me feel like that's the one to bet on here. Best game from a new designer. Once again, a lot of reappearances. I believe Starship Captains is the only new game in this area. So actually, that probably makes sense. If something is the best game from a new designer, it should also appear in other categories. Best theming. A lot of big, heavier ones here. Of course, My Father's Work makes it here. I love that game and really wish it got a bit more love. So we'll see what happens. Then we have best production value. And this one has to, I wonder if there's any of these that weren't a Kickstarter. And I wonder if that affects it, if they count the Kickstarter copy or it has to be retail copy. Either way, these are going to be your prettiest games in terms of components. But then in terms of just look, that would go to artwork. And no surprise, a bunch of the production value ones are also in the artwork one. But of course, I'm going to lean towards Flamecraft there because I think the artwork of all the dragons are so adorable. Then Best Strategy Game, Carnegie is now going to go up against Planet Unknown. So those are put in separate ones in the previous story. We'll see how they duke it out here. Then Innovative Games, Planet Unknown again. A lot of titles we saw before, but then we also see 3000 Scoundrels and Turing Machine. I will say I can see the innovation coming from each of these titles. However, for me personally, if I had to judge the ones that I know, I'm leaning more towards Turing Machine just in terms of the not just the innovation gameplay, but just the idea of how it was made is what sort of surprises me or makes me just more curious a bit more. And then, of course, Game of the Year. This one's a bit bigger, and there are a ton of titles here. Of these, I've not played all of them, but if I was leaning towards one, well, it'd probably go towards Flamecraft, which was the highest ranked of all these on my list. But I have not played all of them, so you'll have to let me know which one you think should be Game of the Year for 2022. So we have some big news from Lorcana, two major things. The first one being from an actual interview, the other one being from a leak. The leak is actually involving the rules that were actually going to be posted in a magazine a little bit later, but we now know a general gist of how the game plays. We're going to start there as that's probably what a lot more people are excited about since, you want to play the game. Now, it seems that you will play pretty similarly to some other deck building games. You draw a hand of 7, you got a bit of a mulligan, you need a 60-card deck. Now, this small tweak is an interesting tweak. You can only use up to 2 colors for what I believe it's inks is what they called it. This is a rule that I definitely think was designed to try to help out a more casual audience and rein in maybe some of those accidental super broken decks. This is mostly because the games that I played in an actual more competitive environment, so the two mostly are Digimon and Magic, I'd often see that the most broken deck was somehow like it was mostly following one color, but because of some weird shenanigans, they were able to throw in like 5-color decks or something weird of that nature. So this has been like, look, you're sticking with these colors. No weird way to cheat in a green card if you're not using the green ink. I think overall, a good design choice. Now, we also know that this is not a game where you're knocking someone's life to 0. Rather, it's going to be the first person to gain 20 lore. So this actually plays a bit more like Keyforge in the sense that you are trying to gather up things for your own self and hit a goal before the other person does. And it sounds like the characters act that way too. They can either be used to gather lore, or they can actually challenge an opponent's character to fight them and get rid of them. So it definitely seems to be balancing not just playing and attacking your opponent, but whether you want to use them to gain more score and victory points. So definitely something that I think is, it makes sense if it's not as combative technically, you're still fighting, but it is really all about just building yourself up rather than tearing your opponent down. Now, that brings us a little bit into actually the other news stories, which we've learned about the OP, or pretty much the tournament kits that will be in stores. Now, usually these are going to have promos and little goodies to give, mostly to the top whatever half of the tournament of people. But it seems that this is actually going to involve a bit more of a scoring system that's designed to actually reward you for doing other things. They said an example was you're going to get points for bringing new players to the tournament. So I wouldn't be surprised then if there are rules for points for given to helping people out with rules or for deck building, something of that nature. Of course, I'm sure discretion of the store, and there's going to be a lot of interesting things coming there, but I like the idea of trying to switch things up a bit besides than just being the winner. Maybe I'm biased because I'm not usually the winner. It would be cool then to see OP kits that come out and maybe score like, we're going to score an extra point if you come to a deck using a specific card or color combination because we're celebrating this. This way you start having tournaments like, technically, yes, the best deck for the format, maybe let's say, is Mufasa. But right now, because of the tournament kick, we're seeing a lot of 7 Dwarves decks because that's what's being rewarded. And I feel like you can really switch up how the game works there and stuff, and also maybe some more silly decks. We'll have to wait and see, but I do like that the point system is trying to look at more than simply just whether you win. So an update on the Inside the Box liquidation and selling. We actually have an announcement from Naylor with some good news and some not so great news. First off, they are working on trying to get people their games. They actually do have most of, it sounds like, if not all of the Kickstarter copies for the games Subterra 2, Crypto X, and Aquanauts. Like those were safeguarded, so those are already made. There may be some add-ons that weren't printed yet, so those might not get made. You will have to pay shipping again, though, so that was confirmed. I mean, it's probably no surprise there. They did say that if you don't want to do that, you can, in essence, donate your pledge, and they'll give it to a charity or something. I don't know exactly how that will work. There'll probably be more details for you in the Kickstarter update or whatever they decide to release. Unfortunately, though, it seems that the game Alba, this was like a big open world game, if I recall correctly, didn't really have any copies made. They're not sure what to do there. Apparently, they're reaching out to the original team. So it sounds like that project may be left in limbo, or worse, just straight up canceled. So you're probably going to hear more on the specifics for your game, depending on which ones you did or did not back. But it does seem that they are trying their best to get what they was already made to the people who already purchased them. But now let's get on to the game announcements. First, we have 4 new games, all coming from Funko, all falling under the Indiana Jones franchise. What we can only assume is because of the new movie coming out. That said, there are 4 titles. These titles include Indiana Jones Cryptic, Indiana Jones Hand Me the Idol, Something Wild Indiana Jones, and Indiana Jones Sands of Adventure. So each one has its own mechanics designed for a lighter or more gamier audience. So pick whichever one I think works best for you. Next one is a bit of an interesting one, and that is a Zombicide expansion, Zombicide Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It's actually going to be part of the fantasy version of Zombicide. It was apparently their portal opens up and shenanigans ensue, but it was part of the White Death campaign. So if you want to back that Kickstarter, you can add this on as well. For those who don't, it will be coming to retail sometime in the future. And for the mini scene, we've got 2 new Star Wars minis, one for X-Wing. These are 2 new starter squadron packs. And for Legion, we have the Clone Commander Cody being added as well. Games Workshop, by the way, just released their line Primarch I talked about a while ago. And apparently it sold out in minutes because of, at least from what I've heard, scalpers, which is a little disappointing. But keeping with copyrights, we have a new Marvel Champions expansion, this one titled Next Evolution. And based on the box art, I think it's safe to say this is X-Men themed. And as for trading cards, we have a bunch of new products as always. For Yu-Gi-Oh! There is Legendary Duelist Soul Burning Volcano. And for Cardfight Vanguard, we've got Clash of Heroes. And for the new card game on the scene, we have Battle Spirit Saga Lore Set 1, which apparently comes with a few goodies, but as well as a book that's showing off the art and story of the card game. But now that we've gone over new game announcements in the news, it's time for the Kickstarter Pickstarter segment. There were a lot of Kickstarters, more than I expected, so you'll have to take a look and see which one is worthy of your dollars. Before we continue, I want to quickly shout out Thorgal from Portal Games. The reason is I've already made a video all on its own. You can watch that one if you want to know more about that Gamebound project. However, the rest of these are all going to be on Kickstarter, so let's get to it. First, we have the deluxe version of Teotihuacan City of Gods. This is an amazing dice worker placement game and includes some extra little goodies and, of course, some really amazing looking components. This is definitely a game that I really enjoyed the original version of, and I won't lie, I really love the look of those pieces, especially the dice. I love the skull symbol on them. Now, in terms of buying everything, there's going to be a bunch of different pledge levels. There's actually going to be just a level if you want the big box to hold all the stuff, which is something you probably appreciate if you already own the game in expansions. That one will go for about $20. There's then some play mats, but for the first one that actually has the game, which does include the deluxe components, that one's going to set you back $131. Next up, we have Santorini, which has a bunch of new things on offer, including, similar to the last one, a more updated version of its core. I remember when this came out, it was a very popular pick when it came to 2-player style games, but this isn't just a rework, there's also some really cool expansions. Santorini Riddle, the Sphinx is actually a cooperative mode, and seems to be having you solve puzzles of the Sphinx in a booklet where each scenario is 2 pages that take place across Greece. Now, if you already have the previous Santorini and just looking to upgrade it, that's going to be $49. To just get a new version of the base, that's $65, and the Riddle expansion is going to cost you another $49. We're now going to head down to a little town of Ravenshire, where a new leader for the Blacksmiths Guild is required. Forges of Ravenshire will have you each playing as blacksmiths using dice worker placement, but of course you'll never have enough dice, so you'll have to place them carefully when it comes to gathering contracts, titles, or resources in order to prove your skill as a blacksmith. One of the big things though that catches my eye here is just the components look really nice. All the boards seem to have inlays, so there's nice places for you to place all your components, be it dice, cubes, or other components that you'll earn along the way. And of course, mechanically speaking, I'm always a big fan of dice worker placement because it gives you that sort of each worker is unique with a different value, and placing them in certain areas could not just depend on whether a space is open, but rather if you have the right number that you need in that spot. If this game sounds interesting to you, it's going to cost you $60 for it to be forged and sent to you to play at your table. Next I want to talk about is Threads of Fate. This is a puzzle game with Norse mythology as its theme, as you will open up different envelopes to solve puzzles using different components. I bring this one up not just because I love puzzle games, but currently I'm actually playing through The Emerald Flame, a previous game of theirs, and I'm having an amazing time with it. There are tons of really good puzzles in The Emerald Flame. We're having a lot of fun with it, so I have to assume that the Threads of Fate will continue this high quality experience. Like I said, there's more than simply paper and coding here, so because of all those extra components, this will cost a bit more than maybe some other escape room games you're used to. It's going to cost you $86 to see what this game has in store for you. And finally, the one I want to talk about is 10th anniversary for paperback as well as typewriter. This is partially because paperback was actually the first game I ever backed on Kickstarter. I bought it actually as a gift for Jonathan, and it turned out to be a very good one, with both of us not only enjoying paperback, but its successors as well. Typewriter seems to be a new game that sounds really cool, where you'll simply be spelling out words with tiles, but every time you use a letter, you're actually going to flip it over and it'll change what letters you have available for the next turn. Either way, from my experience, if you know someone who likes word games, anything in the paperback world is going to be a smash hit, and I highly recommend you check this project out. Now, each game is sold separately, with typewriter at $29 and paperback at $32, but there is a special deluxe 10th anniversary one that is going for $68, but that's probably best for those who are like me who've already fallen in love with this game. But those are the projects that just came out. There are a few that are ending very shortly, but you should hop on these with no delay if they sound interesting. First, we've got Royal Limited, which is part of Button Shy's Simply Solo Games. So if you're looking for a nice, small, compact solo game to take with you that would fit in your pocket, take a look at this one. We've also got the Mindbug card game, which was made by Richard Garfield of Magic fame. And then two very large games. We have the Elder Scrolls, so that is the big game based on the video game series, as well as the Zombicide White Death, which we talked about earlier, which is also offering its Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle expansion. But that is all the news we have for this week. There wasn't one last week because I just felt it was a little light, as well as just so busy with some other stuff. So let me know if there's something I missed because I skipped that week. But you can also talk to me about this week. Are you excited because you now know the rules for Lorcana? Or are you worried about it? What about those awards? Are you excited and happy to see a game get certain recognition? Or was there something left off the list? You can let me know in the comments down below. But for now, I'm Will, and this has been the News Roundup.